Hello everyone and welcome back to another Strategoy video. Ryan and I are back with another faction focus. This time it's for Ironjawz. Ryan, you're still feeling a little bit ill, so that's why I'm helming the video once again. If Ryan suddenly drops out, it's probably because he has to blow his nose, but then he'll obviously mute the mic. So Ryan, thank you for still making some time to do these videos, and even while you're sick.
Oh, you're having health problems sometimes too. So thank you, but it comes with the territory. I think I wouldn't let that stop me. So
Yeah. So surprisingly, we all thought like these two orc factions would be separate things, but at the bottom of this article, they mentioned they would still be in the same orc war pack. So it's still one thing, but two separate factions, as they mentioned.
well, yeah. I mean, they said it functions as two separate ones,
Yeah.
and I think the main reason they're doing that is because if you buy the cards, because they're going to be selling a physical version of the indexes sometime out the gate. So I'm imagining they just come together, but I think they still count as armies 23 and 24, if you will.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I don't think we've got a secret army that they're waiting to unleash on us.
That would be so cool. And then it's gonna be Chaos Dwarfs, right? Surely.
I mean, I'd love it, but I just don't think that's what's happening.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Shall we just dive in?
Yeah, let's do it.
So the battle traits, I think these were given last minute to to an intern. I'm joking. I'm joking. They're fine. It's just like someone delivered their homework and they only realized like one night in advance that they had to make a giant paper on something or something like that, and they
Yeah,
managed to pull this off.
yeah. I think a lot of what makes this army tick is not its battle traits, right?
No.
So it might be deceiving, but I don't think it means that it's weak or they didn't care. I think it's just let's talk about what they used to have maybe first, and then we can compare to what's here because especially with regards to mighty destroyers, the ability on the left,
Yeah.
it was this crazy rule. I don't know how often you played against Ironjawz, but I got a lot of it in the
Mm-hmm.
first couple years when it was more popular.
Yeah.
But basically, it was a command ability, and it had to be done in your hero phase. So now we see that it's once per turn army, but any hero phase. So you're on the surface of things getting it twice as often.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but you gave it out to an Ironjawz model, and or from an Ironjawz model, and the unit receives it must be an Ironjawz unit, of course. And then it was the unit that received it got a movement shenanigan on the basis of how far away they were from enemy units.
Yeah.
So if they were outside of 12, they got to make a normal move in the hero phase. If they were inside 12 but outside combat, they got to attempt to charge. And if they were in combat, they got to make a pile in move,
Yeah.
but not fight, just pile in.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a really amazing way for the army to get across the table very quickly because you were giving this thing out and moving everyone across the board. And if I'm not mistaken, the mega bosses
Yeah.
on either Maw-krusha or on foot were able to issue this 2 or 3 times.
Yeah, you could slingshot one unit from one side of the field to the other side. Well, sort of.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, yeah, a lot of that's going to be gone. As what we're seeing here is that it's a unit that wasn't set up this turn. Okay, so that didn't used to be there. And the target can move up to 3 inches. That's much shorter. It can move into combat. If it
Mm-hmm.
was in combat at the start of the move, it must end that move in combat. So basically, it's the pile-in rule, except that you can do it even if you're not in combat, but you're only moving 3 instead of getting a charge or something.
Yeah.
Um, and the cool thing about it is that you can go from one combat to a totally different combat as long as you're still in combat.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you can switch like which engagement you're in if your opponents are so set up. But it could obviously very well be that if you move 3 inches, um, that you are still in combat with the unit you were originally in. So now you've just got 2 units in combat. Um, I don't have particularly strong feelings about this because I think it's more of a wait and see as far as what we lost. If
Yeah.
the army really needs the movement shenanigans it used to have, but obviously on the surface of things, this is a big nerf. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it looks worse than it is. because it is such an unflashy rework of that ability. The previous ability seemed to do a lot of things, and you could do some amazing things with it, but it also had this... there was still a pretty big chance of failure in there, because if you didn't measure your bubbles correctly, or you failed your charge roll, you were still sitting there, you know. And now with this type of Mighty Destroyers, in certain situations, it's actually a buff. If you're just using it for your normal movement because you got a normal move, and a lot of the foot orcs only moved 4 inches anyway, now you basically get a 6-inch move, because you can use it twice as much as you could before, and it's free as well, so no command points. So you gain a little bit of momentum in your normal moving situation there, but obviously no pile-ins and no charges, which is annoying. And I think for a lot of players, a little bit sad to see that go. That being said, this is, how should I say it, less explosive in its success, but more steady as well. Like, you will always know what you're going to get out of this. And as we'll see with a certain battle scroll a bit down the article here, I imagine there will be a lot of interaction with this ability. It's too plain for it to be just this, especially once you look at the right side of the battle traits, and that's a once per battle ability. So I think there will be a lot more interaction with this ability that we'll be seeing, and we're seeing an example of that below, which we'll get to in a bit.
Yeah, the question of whether you're going to be able to stack this up somehow, like say, I mean, we do get to see one of the named Megaboss on Maw-krusha, and he's not interacting with this rule. But, you know, maybe the regular generic ones still have some amount of interaction with this, so that you can make it 2 units get to do it. I don't know. It's like you said, I think it's a wait and see.
Yeah.
So the Waaagh, which you already said was once per battle in your charge phase, every one of the orc factions had their own version of Waaagh, although it seems that Cruel Boys doesn't have that anymore. But you're picking an Ironjawz hero to be the target, and then for the rest of the turn, the following effects apply to all Ironjawz units while they're wholly within 18 inches of the target. So that's adding 1 to charge rolls and adding 1 to attacks characteristic of those units' melee weapons. Now, this got nerfed because it used to be it had to be your general. So in that sense, it's a buff because it had to be attached to your general, and now it's any Ironjawz hero. But it was board wide, not a wholly within bubble of 18. And depending on how you see it, this is either a side grade or a nerf, maybe, or a buff. Adding 1 to attacks now, it used to be adding or improving the Ren by 1. And so that really depends on the quality of what your attacks are already looking like on your war scrolls, and obviously what your opponent's saves are looking like. So if they had light saves, adding 1 to your rend is a lot less effective than adding +1 attacks. And as we're going to see through the rest of the page, and as they said in their word from the studio segment, attacks is really the thing that Ironjawz seems to be like stacking on in their new set of rules here. So there's just a lot of sources of extra attacks you can get. I do want to point out, those attacks do not apply to companion weapons, because this doesn't say anything about it applying to companion weapons. And as we know, the attacks characteristic and the rest of the weapon profile does not affect companions unless it says otherwise. So this is only for like the actual thinking Oryx, not their beasts. What are you thinking?
I think it's pretty potent. Once again, a little bit easier to execute since it's not only your general. Adding attacks is always good. You taught me that. Like, adding attacks is the best thing that you could add. We're seeing some examples of interactions with this ability. The fact that it has a keyword, Waaagh, kind of makes me feel like there will be more ways to interact with this. Maybe there will be even some units that will allow 2 Waaghs maybe at some point. Or maybe they're already in Linux, who knows.
Would you
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. Finish your thought, and then I'll mention it.
Yeah, adding 1 to charge rolls is also like fine. And you mentioned like losing the +1 to save is quite impactful, and obviously that's true. But we're seeing the watches that we're seeing so far all have amazing save stats already.
Do you mean losing plus improving your rend?
Sorry. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Improving the rend. Yeah. Sorry, that's the one. Yeah, and that could have helped. Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah.
They do have a number of war scrolls that have +1 rend against certain targets. That's one of the more common weapon abilities that we're going to see in a minute. So there are other sources of getting rend, but of course then you're comparing it against what the war scroll used to be and what the meta is for saves and everything. We know that there's less save stacking at this point, so maybe giving their whole army +1 rend was just too much.
Yeah.
So, would you care to scroll down to Gordrakk real quick and see how he interacts with this rule, since
Sure.
you're talking about interacting?
Yeah, so you've got the Voice of Gork ability here. That's also once per battle, and it's a reaction to you declaring a Waaagh ability. So until the start of your next turn, add 1 to hit rolls for combat attacks made by friendly Ironjawz units while they are wholly within 18 inches of this unit. So interestingly enough, you might think it has to be on the same guy issuing the Waaagh, but that's not the case. So Gordrakk issues his mini version of a Waaagh. He adds 1 to hit rolls, and he could also be doing the normal Waaagh and thus improving your charge rolls and your attacks by 1 as well. But you could also have 2 bubbles off on different units.
Yeah, there's a possibility that you're not allowed to do more than one ability in the same phase. I don't know if it says that, but that's at the worst scenario where you would have to have 2 heroes triggering this. But let's assume for now that he can do both. That he can do it and then he can react to his own ability, which does seem to make sense, right? So anyway, it's still wholly within 18-inch bubble. And then so at that point, you're getting +1 to hit rolls, +1 attack, and +1 to charge, which is pretty juicy. Again, the +1 to hit would not apply to mount our companion attacks. So, but I still think it's cool. And like you said, declared a Waaagh ability. It could be that there are different Waahs that come about in the coming battle tome whenever that happens.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Okay. Let's quickly scroll back up to the battle formation that we're seeing here. So we got the Ironjawz Brawl and its natural disaster ability. It's a passive ability. Pretty easy to understand, but also like pretty potent as well, depending how often you're going to roll an 8+ on your unmodified charge rolls. Because every time a friendly non-hero Ironjawz unit, so that's a little bit of a bummer, makes an unmodified charge roll of an 8+, you add 1 to the attacks of that unit's melee weapons for the rest of the turn. So once again, like buffing that attack value, and as you mentioned in the word of the studio, they also said like improving the attacks is a big thing of the style of the Ironjawz.
Yeah, I feel like this is pretty good. I mean, I think Ironjawz is still going to want to run plenty of non-heroes units. I mean, I'm thinking of pigs, big pigs that aren't the hero versions. Obviously Art Boys and Brutes, and the new Brutes that came out in the like Battle Tome extension that happened not too long ago. So there are definitely some hammer units that would love this. And rolling at 8+ isn't going to happen every time, but I mean, it's kind of like one of those Nighthaunt abilities. We know how strong that can be if you're just getting a buff like that on even a charge roll of 8. I think is still pretty juicy, and you're going to be putting a lot out there. There was something you just said about me saying something about at one point that attacks are the ones you want to boost. Depends on what you're looking for in your game. I should say as a caveat here, but if you're someone who believes or who likes consistency, usually adding to the front side of the equation is better than adding to the back side. So even though adding to damage is nice and can be real juicy, it just means it's swingier, and adding more to the attacks has often a similar effect and makes it more smooth of a distribution. Anyway,
what's Kragnos' charge buff ability nowadays again? Do you remember?
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, he added a die to the charge roll, right?
Okay. So once again, depending on whether that's going to count as unmodified, that could actually impact the Ironjawz quite a bit.
Yeah. I still think it's a decent ability. I mean, what are the other formations that they've got here?
Yeah, you got a Grunta Stampede, which will impact the cavalry force aspect. Picks up more speed, maybe run in charge for cavalry stuff.
Could be, yeah.
Who knows?
That'd be nice.
The Iron Fist, who inspire each other to do greater acts of carnage, which is kind of cool description-wise. I wonder whether that'll reward them with buffs for every unit that they've killed or every wound or certain amount of wounds they've inflicted.
Sounds like token stuff though, and like you've been saying, they're trying to get rid of tokens, but who
Yeah, but
knows?
then we saw tokens yesterday as well for the Seraphon for a lot of stuff. So for not for Seraphon, so Jesus, for the Slaves to Darkness.
Yeah.
And then you've got the weird face, and I can't really imagine. I mean, I'm not an Ironjawz player, and every time I've played against Ironjawz, they had a shaman, but only one. What this sub-faction or sorry, battle formation is going to look like, because it's going to enhance their roiling Waaagh energy, so +1 to cast, or maybe you'll get a different spell or something like that, because it says for supernatural protection. So maybe a ward save?
Yeah, sounds kind of weird. I mean, it is Weird Fist, but it doesn't sound like it's what the army wants to do.
Yeah, the thing is, if you're constantly moving 3 inches and you're gonna have to keep bubbles in mind or something like that from a shaman, that's gonna be make things much more difficult.
Yeah, I don't know.
We'll have to wait and see. Speaking of shamans and spells, let's look at the lore of the weird. Bash 'em, lads, or lads. So in your hero phase on a 6-up to cast, you get this unlimited spell. Obviously, you cast it from a wizard, and you target a friendly visible Ironjawz unit wholly within 12 inches. The target's melee weapons have crit 2 hits for the rest of the turn. Pretty nice for an unlimited spell, Ryan, and only a 6-up to cast.
Yeah, so like I've said multiple times in these faction focuses, exploding hits, crit 2 hits, is functionally mathematically the same as +1 to hit. And a lot of the orcs got -1 to hit on their profiles. So in a certain sense, this is kind of making up for that. Let's see what this used to do. Basham lads was casting value 8, wholly within 18-inch bubble for +1 to wound rolls for all Ironjawz units within that bubble. Would you rather have an unlimited spell that didn't
No,
need to
I
be
would rather have the current version.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
I mean, it did go off on a casting value 8, and I don't know how easy that was for an Ironjawz
Yeah.
wizard. They're not really known for their magic, so.
Yeah, and I mean, if a lot of Ironjawz are picking up attacks here and there from buffs, having extra chances to crit on those attacks is never a bad thing.
Especially if you have a lot of attacks, like
Exactly.
they mentioned.
Yeah.
So
okay,
yeah.
Pretty good spell.
Yeah.
On to Gordrakk. When I first saw this battle scroll line, I totally blanked for a second. I couldn't remember what the model was, and I can't believe that I actually just forgot that cabbages existed. Like, I forgot that Maw-krushas were a thing for a second.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and I really love their models.
I've got a buddy who runs 3 of them, and he's got a really amazingly painted and modeled, like custom made big one. But yeah, they're cool. I mean, they've been sitting in a weird place for a while.
Yeah,
Especially
they were super good a while back, though.
Yeah, definitely.
Man.
Gordrakk has had like his biggest glow up here, as far as I'm concerned. It's small, but it's important. Is that he went from a 4-up save to a 3-up save.
Yeah.
And even though the other Megaboss, the generic one, always had a 4-up, you could choose a weapon loadout that would switch that to a 3-up, and it just made him so much more survivable. And he delivered almost all the same value, if not more, because he could take a command trade and artifact and all that stuff. So anyway, obviously we got a big boy. His movement, like a lot of the monsters we've seen, has gone 2 inches down from what its top bracket used to be, but it stays fixed at its second best bracket. So at the end of the day, it's not that bad. And movement is just coming down for a lot of units now. Big old 20 health, only a control score of 5. I was starting to think if something hit a big enough health characteristic, it might get a little more, but evidently it's a little random. Like Be'lakor we saw yesterday had 10. He's a war master, but he always was. So let's look at his abilities, and we'll come back to his profile. So we already talked about the orange ability, Voice of Gork, for changing the Waaagh. Yep. Again, that'll bump his hit roll up to 2+2+ for his non-mount, non-companion attack. But that's it. He's got maybe this is a good transition to do the end of turn ability right before we talk about the profiles. So if we do the Rampage, the red one, you can pick an enemy monster in combat with this unit to be the target. Roll a die. And this is a dice, so it's on a 3-up. Pick one of the target's weapons. You must pick a companion weapon if it has any. So I guess it's possible that you don't have to pick a companion weapon. Like, let's say it doesn't have any. It's like, was Laukavai a monster? I think so, right?
Yeah.
Laukavai doesn't have companion attacks, so you pick any attack you like of Laukavai's. Otherwise, it has to be a companion, and you have the attack's characteristic rounding up for the rest of the turn. How impactful do you feel like this is?
Depends on the monster, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Like usually, a lot of monsters have big attacks or big damage attacks, and they don't tend to be as highly numbered attack wise as they are for Gordrakk, for example. You don't really see monsters with 8 attacks on their profile, for example. You usually see like 4 or 6 and then a big damage number next to them. So having that is pretty impactful. I do agree with that. And using this on a Gargant, for example, that also really hurts, right?
Well, especially because that's not only one model, but that one model is like a quarter of their army.
Yeah, exactly.
You just cut down one of their profiles by half. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty impactful. Would you rather it have been damage on a monster or attacks?
Attacks.
Okay.
Some wise sage mentioned to me that if you want to impact a profile, you better do it at the front end and at the back end. So
for consistency's sake, but if you're worried about that big swing, I could see wanting to damage
I
that.
only remember half what you're saying, Ryan. It's only the good halves.
Okay, all right. Fair enough. Yeah, if you could choose, it would obviously be real powerful. I think there's a part of me that leans into the having the damage, because I feel like that's where a lot of monsters get their value. But like you said, in this profile here, I would have the attacks for sure.
Yeah, and especially since it's rounding up, having and a lot of monster attacks are 3 damage. Yeah. Having the damage just reducing by 1 is less effective than reducing the attacks by 2 or 3.
Definitely. Okay, so let's look at the end of the turn ability. His only other ability on the war suit.
Super weird ability.
Well, so what this used to be was at the end of the combat phase, either combat phase, if any models were slain by a wound caused by an attack made by this unit in that combat phase, you added 1 to his wounds characteristic permanently. So he went from 20 to 21 and so forth. And you added 1 to the tax characteristic of his melee weapons, which he used to have 2. So they each had 5 attacks. So you're basically adding 2 extra attacks to your profile every single time, but not for the mount. Now, what it does, if any damage points were allocated to an enemy unit by this unit's combat attacks this turn, and that enemy unit has been destroyed. So it used to just be a model.
Yeah.
You can give this unit a Waaagh token up to a max of 3. So seeing as it's the end of any turn, it would take to get max Waaagh tokens would take you a turn and a half if you're just right in combat from the beginning. And then the wording here is weird, but I think it's pretty intuitive once you just think about it for a sec. So this happens at the end of the turn. This goes off, and it says until the end of the next turn, add 1 to the attacks characteristic of this unit's weapons for each Waaagh token it has, which basically means you can't boost its attacks with this ability before you fight in like a phase. It goes off at the end of the previous turn, but lasts for the whole next one. And it checks every single turn, including those of your opponent. So this is taking his total number of attacks up from on Smashing and Cunning, his 2 weapons, up from 8 to 9 to 10 to 11 if he gets maxed out. And then, of course, if you call the Waaagh, then that goes up to 12. And it can do quite a lot of work. It gets the numbers up there. I've done the math on this. I didn't do it super extensively, but the way his profiles used to work were trying to target either a hero that was a wizard or a hero that wasn't a wizard. And it got some amount of mortal wounds if it targeted one or the other, depending on which weapon it was. But overall, you need to get some of these on it to make him do the work that it used to do. And the problem is, if you want to call it a problem, is that before it was he could have been adding 1 to the attacks of both of his weapons 10 times per game, right?
Yep.
So he was adding 2 attacks and it was unlimited, right? So this can maxes out at 3. So it is good. Don't get me wrong. When he gets maxed out, he's doing a lot of damage, especially with all the other buffs we can expect in the army. But I think it got a little bit worse, even though it's got anti-hero +1 rend. The math on his mounts attacks got worse not only because it brackets, but then it got the monster treatment of -1 to hit, +1 to wound. It lost a point of rend, but it only gets it back if it's going against a monster.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. So
Would this affect the companion weapons as well?
no, because it's unless it says companions in the ability, it doesn't affect companion abilities.
Yeah.
So no. And I wish they hadn't have done that. I wish it would have just said specifically his weapon. And so because this is going to definitely catch some, let's call it less tournament experienced players off guard.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are going to accidentally be buffing all their companions up for a while until someone points it out to them. So, but we'll see.
Yeah, so here's my thinking about it. So as I understand it, Ryan, if you want the biggest bang for your buck with this ability, and that's more explosive than its current version, if you want the 3 Waaagh tokens in one turn, because obviously they're gonna go away otherwise. So what you could do is you roar, Big Thief's roar, with a ranged weapon, a unit, and you have it killed by a different unit. It doesn't say that he has to kill that unit. It can just die to anything. Then you need to spread your attacks with Smash and Cunning and Big Thief's Fist and Tail to separate units. And if they all die, so if 3 units die in that turn, then you would get 3 Waaagh tokens. That's the best case scenario, right?
That's not how I'm reading the rule, though. I think it means that, wait, if any damage points are allocated to an enemy unit by this unit, and that enemy is destroyed, give it a unit to a maximum of 3. Unless you're saying, okay, so I had read this, maybe I'm wrong. I thought it meant he can have Waaagh tokens to a max of 3. You can only get 1 per turn.
I don't think so.
If it means you can get 3 per turn, then I agree with you, and I take back everything I said about not being able to get bigger. Yeah. That said, you do have to destroy the units, and like you said, this army is not exactly the best army for like chit damaging things, you know. So having him go in just precisely at the end when things are almost dead, or the other way around, I don't know if it's going to come off as much as it is. So yeah, I'm curious how the wording of this. My brain went to kind of like what we were seeing with the celestial PowerPoints on the what's it called, the Engine of the Gods, 2 days ago. That maxes out. It's like a token that can only get up to 3. Yeah. That's what I was thinking this was. But if you're right that it's 3 per turn, then that's pretty obvious. Awesome. But
I mean, yeah. I also think it's of a maximum of 3, but you could potentially get them all in one turn. That's what I'm saying.
I know what you're saying. What I'm saying is I don't even know if the rule works that way, or even if it does work that way, how often it's actually going to get off. Yeah. And if you're doing that good at killing all your opponent's units, like you might not need all those attacks. It might be just more, what do we call it? When you're being rewarded for already doing what you wanted to do. I forget what that is. There's a word we use in Warhammer talk. Win more. So maybe, but I hope it works the way you do, because that does seem more flavorful, cool, the way that you interpreted it. And it kind of replaces something I forgot to mention with the battle traits earlier. That's they lost, what's it called? Smashing and Bashing. Was that the name of the rule? Yeah. Smash and Bashing, which is where if you finished a unit off, then another one of your units could immediately activate thereafter. That's another big thing that they lost from their battle traits. And so even though this doesn't replace that gameplay style does sound like what you just talked about. So it reminded me of. Yeah. So yeah, we'll have to see. I don't know.
I also don't really understand the first bit of the second paragraph where it says until the end of the next turn, because nowhere it mentions that the Waaagh tokens go away, right?
Yeah, that's what I mean. Is like I think it was just saying like this checks at the end of the turn, and there's no way that you can bump it up in the middle of the turn to get more attacks for later in that turn if for some reason you were able to fight twice or something. Like, I don't know. It's just maybe they're just trying to address. It's an end of turn ability. That's when it checks, and they want it to also resolve at the end of the turn as well.
Yeah, so, because you had to you would pop this at the end of every turn, so thus adding the maximum of 3 Waaagh tokens to your abilities every turn for every turn afterwards as well. But then, as you mentioned, they probably wrote it this way. So, what if I understand you correctly, to circumvent the possibility of adding or of killing units not in a combat phase or something like that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and then boosting yourself before your next combat
Yeah.
phase. It's
Yeah.
gonna be frozen until you're the end of your next turn.
Mhm.
And if you look at the wording in italics, it looks like it's gonna apply to the regular Megaboss on Maw-krusha
Yeah.
too. So
That's what I was
pretty
thinking as
cool.
well.
Pretty cool. He did lose like the other, well, probably also the other Megaboss, the ability to give extra CPs out, but they've been real strict about not giving that kind of stuff out anymore. Can you think of a single instance where someone allows someone to use 2 CPs or gives you more CPs? I don't think I've seen one yet.
No, not yet. No.
So yeah, and it could be that this rule that we just looked at even applies to the Megaboss foot because he also used to have strength from victory. So
Yeah, I think the head designer, the lead designer for AOS4 did mention that there was no war scroll that would interact with CPs.
yeah, yeah, and people are immediately saying, "Oh, there's going to be some way around that." I thought OBR is the only one, and they
Hmm.
didn't even get it right.
Yeah.
They just gave them a different system.
Yeah.
So it
That
looks like
being
they're
said,
keeping their
there are
word.
more ways to get CPs in the core rules than there were before, I feel like. But there's less in the indexes now.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah. I mean, I hope it works the way you're reading it. My brain just went to the way a lot of other rules have been read. So, yeah, that would be
Yeah, it
cool.
depends how you interpret the comma, right? Which is annoying that we have to be so precise about that.
Yeah, it's just there's so many other rules that function the way I was talking about that it just is confusing.
Yeah.
But maybe there's some people that read it out there and they don't even play Ironjawz and they're like, no, 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 I read it the other way. I have no dog in this fight, but I still read it the way that's going to benefit him more. So
Yeah. Let
that's
us know what
cool.
you guys think in the comments.
Yeah.
Okay, on
Okay.
to the Warchanter. So this guy went through a very big transformation because when I played against Ironjawz, whatever type of army, I saw a bunch of these guys working on the airfields or airplane fields or whatever you call airports.
Oh
They
yeah.
they always make me think about these guys with the lanterns that leads airplanes down the lane. um,
Yeah.
or the guys at a concert like woo. Um, and there, I guess there's more of the last category, but now they've changed it up. They became priests.
Yeah, I mean they were functionally always basically priests. I'm looking at my third edition battle tome here. I even wrote next to the war beats rule in parentheses basically a prayer
Yeah,
because it has to go off on a 3+, and it was kind of like remember the Auric Warclans book was one of the first books out of the gate for third edition, like literally tied with Stormcast.
yeah.
And a lot of the wording in second edition for priest used to work that way,
Mm-hmm.
where it would say like they just roll a die and they would explain the whole thing instead of saying it's a prayer and chanting value. So I have a feeling this one was something they were always going to transfer it to, but they just didn't get it in time at the beginning of that edition or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
So his like he's got a couple things that are really interesting. One is that yes, he's been transformed. He used to have basically on your list writing, you had to decide which prayer each one of your war chanters knew of 3 different prayers, and you could choose to go redundant on it and have 2 of them with the same thing, but you can only get that prayer, let's call it the beat, off once per turn. So the redundancy would just be if one of them died, or you needed to have different sources for different parts of the battlefield. Now, of course, because it's moved to a prayer lore, they all have access to all the prayers, which I'm assuming are going to be the things that were their war beats.
Yeah.
Um, that said, the ability that we're going to see below in a second was actually an ability that they got in addition to the quote unquote prayers that was free, and where you it was called Violent Fury, and it was basically you just picked an Ironjawz unit holier than 15, and you gave it +1 to its damage for melee weapons, and it couldn't stack. That has now been, if you scroll down to the kilobeat war prayer that we've got here,
Mm-hmm.
that is this prayer, except it's got the name of what used to be a thing that gave them +1 to hit, and it was one that went off on a 3+. Now it goes off on a 4+, but it can be overcharged to 8, and then it does the damage thing, and then it can hit 2 different eligible units instead of 1 if you charge it up. Now you say, all right, that sucks that it got moved to not a free ability for sure. It's definitely a nerf, and now it's a prayer. You can only still cast it once. It used to be able to, you'd spread it across your whole army if you had enough
Mm-hmm.
guys, and then they'd still get to do the beat. But the thing about getting the overcharge versions, we actually see probably the best priest for getting extra ritual points thus far. I don't know if we've seen anyone that generates them better than this. So if we scroll back up to the Warchanter and look at his end of the turn ability, if this guy slays any models, at the end of the turn, he gets D3 ritual points. So if you do a magical intervention and you're praying every turn and you get this off. So he wants to get stuck into, of course he does. And he doesn't have a bad profile. Like, I mean, he can do some damage. Let's see, on average, that's 4 wounds before you count for Ren. So against a 2-up save, that's 2 wounds. Sorry, 4-up save, it's 2 wounds. So anyway, it's kind of cool. It'd be neater if he didn't have to be in combat to get it, but it definitely fits with his, what Ironjawz wanted to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I do think these guys kind of got nerfed, but there's also a certain element of side grade. And of course, by him knowing all the prayers, you don't have to commit to one at the beginning of the game. You can just flexibly choose which ones I'm assuming there's 3, and we've seen one of them already.
Yeah, and him being a priest now also enables him to banish manifestations, which is something he could not do before.
Right. Yeah. And who knows, maybe we still have a universal prayer for smite, so he can go start smiting some other priests. Who knows? But
did they clarify, Ryan, that whether a priest could also summon all kinds of manifestations, or only still the invocations, or is there no difference anymore now?
I think it's just they can do like the invocations, like the priest version of endless spells.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. What are you thinking about this guy?
Yeah, I think if you want multiples, it's obviously like a downgrade, because previously you could do them without any charging up. That being said, a 3+, you know that I'm on the fence about anything that's a 3+ for the entire use of a model, or the value of a model. So yeah, you still had a 33% chance of not using your stuff at all. And obviously now you might not use it as often as you want either, because you have to charge them up. But you still get some more predictability, at least for yourself, because once you have enough of those ritual points, you know that you're gonna get your ability off. And I also like the fact that he's a priest now, and if you're not running enough shamans, you at least, or you want your shamans to cast their own spells or unbind spells, you still have that sneaky value from a priest to dispel, or banish manifestations. There's gonna be a lot of manifestations on the battlefield nowadays, because you get them for free.
Yeah.
I actually think they gain some value in a certain way as well.
Yeah, I mean, you were just talking about the ability that can only go off on a 3+. That was the beat, but then the other ability that is now a prayer for +1 damage was free, and so that's definitely something that went off automatically.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but who knows? Maybe you'll have a really reasonable price point, and there'll be reason to take 2 of these guys in the list. So I don't know, but I'd say wait it out to see what the other prayers are, because one of the prayers used to be a 3d6 charge. Or beats, I should say, and the other one was healing D3 wounds. I kind of have a feeling that one's going to go away, and then they'll keep the +1 to hit. But I don't know, maybe not, or maybe they'll just change the fix and beat was the healing one. So fix and meant like healing, but an orc, if you will.
Yeah.
So maybe they'll still have it, but I just don't see this army as being a healing army. That seems like a thing that doesn't lean into what they're all about. But maybe
I agree.
Maybe. Okay.
On to the brutes.
Yeah.
I love that they showed us these guys, because they're awesome models.
Yeah, this is one of the kits. The Art Boys got a new War Scroll when they got the Battle Tome extension, but these guys didn't. But they released the Brute Rekkas and the other like 3-person Brutes units. This one was always kind of like your it had tech that they added to it, which is this ability we're going to look at in a second.
Yeah.
But
pretty
it was
good tech
also
as well.
It's fantastic tech. But they were always kind of like your elite infantry, because Ironjawz admittedly just didn't have that many units until they had the expansion. And the expansion added it doubled the size of the army, especially if you didn't count the Underworld's warbands and stuff. So the ability they used to have was exactly this ability, except it only worked with a health characteristic of 1. So why don't you walk us through it and talk about the implications?
Yeah, so the Umesen ability affects all enemy models with a health characteristic of 1 or 2, because they cannot contest objectives while they are in combat with this unit. So That's some really nice tech. You don't actually need a big unit for this either. You could just tie something up. They have a 3-up save, so that's not impossible to imagine. And doesn't matter how big your opponent's unit is gonna be, as long as they have a health characteristic of 1 or 2, they count as 0 on the objects, or at least they can't even contest objectives. So it's even better than counting as 0, Ryan, because as the wording works here, every time that a mission pack would say if you're contesting an objective, it would not even trigger this way because you cannot contest objectives.
Yeah, so what's the wording on Stone Guard, Lumineth Stone Guard? Is it that they have to be contesting the objective to get that ward?
Contesting and controlling.
Yeah, so then that turns off their ward too.
Yeah.
So it's not just for the battle tactics, which is also very strong, but also a number of abilities on models say they have to be contesting an objective.
Yeah, I think this is a
So
really strong ability.
yeah, and with 1 or 2, it expands to like all Stormcast. Like it previously wasn't hitting Stormcast at all. It's expanding to way more things. Now, most cavalry just got bumped up to 3 or more wounds, or health, I should say. But there's probably some that still has 2. I don't know, somewhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, this is a great ability. And you mentioned the 3+ save. It used to be 4+. So this unit's definitely tanky. They come in 5s, obviously.
Yeah.
Now, their weapon profile, they had a complex weapon profile. You used to choose between a shorter range that had more output or a longer range that had a little less. But they had a flat +1 to hit at all times with if they were targeting a big unit, so one with a wounds characteristic of a 4 or more. Now they're more focused on infantry, right? Because their main weapon, which is the brute weapons, is +1 rend if it's against infantry, which is the vast majority of models you'll encounter. Its output is somewhere in between what the old weapons used to be, if you're accounting for the +1 hit they used to have, because we basically got -1 to hit at this point. So they would have been 2 better at hitting at that point. But still, -2 rend with these guys is not bad. And like we said, if you keep adding in that attacks, you keep bumping those attacks up. If you have a damage characteristic of 2 or 3, like these guys have, it's the amount that's going through is increasing by quite a lot.
Yeah.
So
and then the unlimited spell to have exploding hits.
Yep. And let's say you got the Gordrakk Waaagh off, so then you're getting +1 to hit in, and functionally you're getting +2 to hit with exploding hits and that, plus attack. And then let's say you're in the formation, you get another attack for charging on an 8+. I mean, we're talking about quite a lot of work. And that's before even looking at the 1 and 5, the elite weapon. We saw this with a Stormcast model unit. It might have been Liberators that they said explicitly that the champ can no longer take the fancy weapon. So the +1 attack will be from the champ will be going on to the regular brute weapons. But the Gore Chop, it does quite a lot of work. I mean, it's obviously 50% more output and basically has the rend built in. So yeah, nice for 1 extra guy. And so it's basically like you got 2 champs. You got the guy with the good weapon, and then you got a champ that's putting out a little bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's only one thing about this War Scroll that's throwing me off a little bit, Ryan, and that's the color of the Umessin ability. Purple means at the end of the turn, but it doesn't say at the end of the turn, so I'm guessing it triggers whenever, but it still throws me off a little bit.
Yeah, Vince confirmed on Warhammer Weekly that he knew from like insider playing knowledge that he that an ability, what was it on someone's War Scroll that doubled the damage? It was Indrasta. Both her spear in shooting and in melee should be doubling the damage, but on the thing it's got the color for combat phase, so red. And people were like, oh, well, you got to also look at the color, and if it doesn't match, then it doesn't apply to other phases. But he said that it does in fact apply, as long as it's there's something in the core rules that says when
so
it's
they're only coloring it purple here because usually contesting objective matters only at the end of the phase, end of the turn.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool.
Okay, on to the last War Scroll because there's no spearhead stuff.
Yeah, speaking of no spearhead, let's just mention that this is a bit weird, but they said obviously there's no Vanguard or spearhead box for the Ironjawz half of the army. They did mention that something would be coming like eventually, but like don't hold your breath for it. In the meantime, it's just Cruel Boys. So I guess the spearhead situation, that's the only other thing that would make me think that maybe there is a 24th army coming that's not Cruel Boy, like that Ironjawz and Cruel Boys count as only one, because I'm pretty sure they said there were 24 Spearhead boxes. And yes, we have a new Spearhead force for both Stormcast and Skaven coming with the main box, like the launch box. But I don't think they were counting those in the 24. So now I'm confused what that means. Like, and of course they gave Gargants one, but they never had one 24 armies. So now I don't even know what to think. Maybe they just misspoke, or maybe they were just thinking about what this would be eventually.
Yeah, and at the
That we
bottom, they were quite clear in not giving us a lot of hopium. And normally they're kind of vague in that department, and they're like, just keep an eye out. But now let's quickly scroll to the bottom here because I don't want to say the wrong thing.
Sure.
And while we've heard rumbling and clattering with a distinctly Gorkish timbre to it, there's nothing on the horizon just yet. So that also feels like it's possibly kind of a ways off.
Yeah. That's what makes me wonder about when they said there were 24. So, I mean, if there's look, for those people with a lot of hopium out there that are a 24th totally new army to be coming out shortly, that would also mean we'd be getting a new Spearhead box for that army, if my connecting the dots here means anything. So I just don't see them releasing a whole new army anytime soon when they're going to be doing range refreshes for Stormcast and Skaven, including introducing new models.
Yeah. It'd
So
be weird without any hype as well.
yeah, and it would take too much of the thunder away from the launch that we've already got. So, but if we do get it, that's amazing because it's probably an army I want to play. So I'm all down for it.
Okay, so let's quickly look at not quickly, let's just look at the war scroll. So you get the Maw-grunta here with Hacking Crew. So that's the one with the two boys at the sides as well. 10-inch move. Did that go down in move as well, Ryan?
Funny thing is the move got better as it got more momentum. So it's actually one better than its base momentum, and it's identical to the second level, but it's lower than the next two levels after that.
12 health, 3 up save, 5 control. Then you got these different weapon profiles. I almost wish that they kind of just combined the choppas and the kill choppas, because they've been doing that for a lot of war scrolls, and I don't understand why they don't do that here. But I mean, small difference, I guess.
I mean, mathematically, if they just made it 2 attacks on the kill choppas,
exactly,
but bumped it up to 2 damage, it would be the same thing. And then just roll those 2 attacks into the choppas. Yeah. But to be fair, when they charge, both of those are going to get +1 attack.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yes, it's definitely better for the attack buffs.
Yeah, because now they're getting 2. Now the companion weapon's not, but yes, the top 2.
Yeah, so it has 2 abilities, and both are kind of interesting and definitely flavorful. So you've got the passive here on the left, Unstoppable Momentum. Each time this unit uses a charge ability, it gains 1 momentum point. Now, this says, Ryan, it uses a charge ability. It doesn't say like yesterday's War Scroll where it said this unit charged. So from what I understand, this could actually be a failed charge as well, because you're still using that charge ability.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. You're right that there's a rules legalese difference here, because we've seen in some of them that just say have charged or whatever, and it doesn't have the bold keywording, which makes me also think that maybe those abilities in the other, instead of the way you're interpreting it, the other way around, that like counter charge wouldn't count for the abilities that don't have it in rules bold, like we're seeing here.
Yeah.
Or same with redeploy for run.
Yeah,
But this is definitely clear that those count in this ability.
Yeah. Each time it uses a run ability, it gains 2 momentum points. So that's also interesting that it's more than a charge ability. That's why I'm thinking that you don't actually have to finish your charge. Yeah, but that's one thing. It can have a maximum of 3 momentum points at once. You add the number of momentum points this unit has to the damage characteristic of its Maw-grunta tusks. So potentially going from 2 damage to 5 damage. At the end of each battle round, subtract 1 from its momentum points to a minimum of 0. Cool ability. I like it.
Yeah, it gets the guy the tusks really high up in the rend, or in just the damage output for this model.
Yeah, and force to hit is obviously not amazing, but 2 to wound is pretty good with a 5 attack profile and the possibility of bumping that up.
Well, it's a companion.
Ah, dang it.
Yeah. So yeah, don't be holding out. But I mean, buffing the damage up to 5 is really good.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, so the mechanics of how this works is a little bit different than it used to be. I don't even know if it's worth talking about it because the unit hasn't been out for that long.
Hmm.
And they had a lot of trouble in the meta because the original way the momentum was written was really rough. But anyway, it's gotten improved over time. But it used to be 6 momentum points. Now it's a max of 3. And so you got to say you got 3, and then the end of the battle round you lose 1. So that means that even if you're at the max at the end of your battle round, you're always going to be starting at best the next battle round with 2. So you need to build it back up. But with all the different ways you can do that with the counter charge, I don't remember what power throughs keywords were if it had one of these keywords, but that might be one. But definitely with redeploy, I mean, you've got some cool movement shenanigans to start getting this back up, and I don't think they're going to have too much trouble keeping that momentum score high.
Hmm.
And obviously, the only thing it impacts anymore is its output of the tusk. So it used to impact more things like the rend of the kill choppas, I think, and the move characteristic. And so those things were, and then even your monstrous rampage, if I'm not mistaken. So it really relied on it a lot more before, and now it's just focusing on that attack profile. And I think that's totally.
Yeah, and keep in mind the right ability also adds a way of adding momentum points. So it might seem like it's difficult to add momentum, but you also get the carve a path ability here.
You go for it.
Yeah, so once per turn, so you can't do it with multiple Maw-gruntas, which is a bit of a bummer in my eyes because doubling up on these guys seems like a totally badass move. In your movement phase, it's a core, a move, and rampage keyworded ability, so that's quite a lot of keywords. If this unit is in combat, it can move a distance up to its move characteristic, so 10 in this case. It can pass through models and the combat range of enemy units, but it cannot end that move in combat. So this is basically a power through thing before powering through something. So you get 2 times the value out of it. Then pick each enemy unit that this unit passed across during that move to be the targets. Roll d3 on a 2+, inflict an amount of mortal damage on the target equal to the roll. Then this unit gains 2 momentum points. Pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, like you were saying that only one. It's a bummer that only one could do it, and I agree with you. But it is a so.
It's a what?
It is a rampage, and
Yeah.
rampages have always been once per each one, whatever.
Yeah.
And it was, and this same ability was a rampage before, so it's not like it got nerfed or anything. In fact, I think this ability is really nice. Um, the fact that it is your move though, so in your movement phase, you do this instead of making a move. So you're not going to get to move after you get out of combat, but you can charge, and you could very easily just set yourself right outside of 3 inches of someone, um, and then you just charge back in and go fight again. So pretty neat. Now we haven't seen anything in the army thus far, I think, that gives us charge bonuses, as in like if you charge, you get better output.
Mm-hmm.
But except for the one rule with the unmodified 8. So if that if that goes off, it's going to be buffing the attacks of the guys on top, and so that's kind of nice. So you're setting yourself up with one of these units to do some mortal wounds, get more momentum, and be able to charge again and get that buff back. So
Yeah, I mentioned in the when we were covering the battle trees, Ryan, that I see this ability as something I would interact with the Mighty Destroyer's ability. Because as I see it, the best way to use this model is move it up 3 inches in front of a unit, moving make it end up there with powering through, for example. Then in any hero phase, you move them into combat with this. Then in your movement phase, you move them out of combat with this and inflict a bunch of mortal wounds. And then, as you mentioned, you charge them back in. In your charge phase, you get the third momentum point on top of that. And then you get your Maw-grunta tusks on 5 damage each.
yeah, pretty sweet. And like if you read the flavor text here, it says specifically Hack and Crew in the description,
Yeah.
which is there's another version of these guys that you might take more than one of, which is the Maw-grunta Gougers, which, if I'm not mistaken, was also not a hero. Yeah, wasn't a hero. So you're going to have 2 different types of units, and that one will probably have its own version of a rampage too. So one can only hope that each one of the different types that they have each gets a unique rampage. So you could at least
Yeah.
have 3 of these and be doing some fun. And we did say that there's going to be a Grunta Stampede, which probably is these guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, So, and they also have an army of renown. So, I think the stonks on these guys might be going pretty up, and they got +1 on their save. They lost 2 points of health, but I'd rather have a 3+ save personally,
Definitely.
than 2 points a hit.
And with this many keywords on your Carve a Path ability, we can't actually really gauge the value of this ability yet, because there might be so many ways to interact with these keywords.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what they're going to have in store. Someone mentioned in our Discord chat, I think it was Agaroth, said that evidently it was leaked that mount traits do exist. So if that's a thing, I could see that interacting with this. So, we'll have to see.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, but I think this unit will definitely see play.
I hope it. I mean, like, this unit is just so cool. Like, this new kit, all the new Ironjawz stuff is cool. Would you ever consider playing Ironjawz, you think, with what we've seen here?
I did consider it for a very short while, because I actually have some Ironjawz models painted up already. I have them painted as Warcraft orcs, so with a more like almond colored skin, I guess. I like them. I gotta be honest, orcs are just not a thing for me personally, but as far as orcs go, I like these the best. I like the forwardness of them, charging straight through stuff, but if I would want to go with a full melee focused army, I think I'd lean more into Khorne rather than Ironjawz. For some reason, Destruction never has pulled me in as much as the other factions. Or grand alliances.
Yeah, I still think I'd be more inclined to play Cruel Boys, but the new pigs definitely interest me.
Yeah.
I did forget to mention that they lost run and charge if their momentum score was a 4 or higher out of 6. I don't know how often players were getting to that, so it might not be as big of a thing to lose, but obviously run and charge on a unit like this is pretty nice.
Yeah. I am almost 100% sure there's going to be a run and charge ability in the book.
Especially considering they lost their Mighty Destroyer's normal move. It seems like that would be logical.
Yeah. I think there's got to be. It's just too good with these kinds of War Scroll abilities, like the Unstoppable Momentum obviously benefits from that greatly. But then also the fact that their movement is a little bit less shenanigan-y, I suppose I would say. I think there will be some running charging happening for sure. Yeah, right. I would normally say let's move on to the War Scroll, Spirit War Scroll quickly, Ryan, but that's not a thing anymore. So we're actually at the end of the review.
Yeah, and tomorrow is Big Sylvaneth, which one of our biggest audiences is Sylvaneth, although it seems like we've been attracting big audiences from all the factions recently. So
yeah, we're doing well. Thank you guys so much, by the way, for that, because Ryan and I, we put a lot of work into these kind of videos. It's always a bit of a... Well, it's been less of a hassle for the last couple of days to find a moment for us to both be free to record this. But that's probably because we've been recording 20 of these in the past now. I almost got a little bit emotional this afternoon, Ryan, because I was thinking like it's coming to an end. Only 2 more.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of like a project. I remember telling my girlfriend getting... I think you had a similar story, kind of. I'm like, well, if we keep this up, we're going to be basically having another job for 5 days of the week. Yeah. I mean, it takes a while to do these, even though we're just screen capturing the article, because you've got to edit it a bit and upload it and make sure everything's right. And
yeah,
we got to get the timing down.
How many minutes would you say on average you're spending on these to do the comparison and mathematics and such?
And at least an hour per army, I think.
Yeah, and then on average, we're also spending an hour recording this.
Yeah.
I'm spending like half an hour editing and uploading these things. So that's 2 hours a day for you and 1.5 hours for me. So yeah, multiply that by 5. That's quite a lot of work.
Yeah. So thank you guys. Really appreciate it. Yeah, I'm going to miss it too. I'm going to miss having constant news articles coming out that apply to the game I love. But we're going to have when those indexes drop, it's going to feel like articles for days.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, thank you guys. I'm really looking forward to your reactions to this review once again. Every time that I upload these, I try not to look at the comments the same night, But then in the morning, I am so happy when the American crew woke up and they started commenting. Like I'm so happy to reply to all of these comments. So I'm looking forward to that. So definitely leave a comment, share your thoughts with us. What are you thinking about how the ability from the War Master here from Gordrakk works, strength from victory? How do you interpret that? Interpreted that? Is that more like Ryan's interpretation, or is it more like mine? And what do you think about what you've seen from the Ironjawz so far? Are you excited? Leave a like, and if you want to stay in touch for the next couple of videos and our review of a lot of indexes, definitely subscribe, because that'll make it much easier for you to pick those up. And we'll see you guys tomorrow for Sylvaneth. Thank you, Ryan, for joining us, and see you tomorrow.